So Singapore, 82% of residents live in public housing. How was Singapore able to accomplish that and do that when so many other cities and countries have well under that percentage?
Well, I think firstly, the government has been very committed to providing affordable housing, mainly because we're actually a very young country. We're actually only 50 years old. So when we gained independence from the British, one of the key objectives of the government then was to make sure that everybody had affordable housing, because we wanted people to have a stake in the country. It's a new nation, and we felt that unless people have a stake in the country, they won't feel that they belong as citizens. So there was a very strong policy commitment. So the way we did it was that we provided affordable housing through a series of subsidies. But beyond subsidy, we would have to find a way to help people to have to pay their mortgage. How do you help to pay the mortgage? And we do this through a mechanism called the Central Provident Fund, the CPF. In Singapore, every working adult would have to contribute 20% of our income to the CPF, like a pension fund, which has our name on it. It's like a bank account, and it's not commingled. Our employer contributes 17% of our income to the CPF. So every Singaporean who's working has a 37% savings rate. That's a very high savings rate. Part of the CPF goes into an account that is for retirement. You can't touch it. Part of it goes into healthcare to buy insurance, health insurance. So every Singaporean is covered by health insurance. And the remaining 23% can be used for housing. So for me, I come from the Housing and Development Board with the Public Housing Authority. When I build, I will price the flat to be between 20 to 25% of your income that you have to pay monthly. So with a 23% savings rate in the CPF that can be used for housing, it means that everybody who buys public housing almost need not come up with any cash outlay every month to pay their mortgage, because they just use the CPF money.
So it's like a mandatory savings regimen.
Yes.
And there was no resistance to that? I mean, I'm just thinking about if that were being applied in the United States, for example, I don't think people would resist being told to save that much, even if it's so prudent. But I guess from the early days of Singapore, that was just part of the culture, you're saying?
Yes, and people know that it's their money, because it's not commingled, as I said. It's your bank account, it's your account, and it works towards retirement adequacy. So instead of having a huge social welfare system that many countries and cities have, and you're never sure whether you will have the money when you retire, in this case, you know the money is there because it's yours.
Do you think that part of it or any other element of Singapore's system could be adapted to other cities?
It's not a system that can always be adapted. There are some things that you could do. There are cities that are very interested in the system, especially in cities that have a more central government, which is a little stronger. So we've had many people come to talk to us, and China is one country where some cities are very interested in the system. And lately, even some of the Indonesian cities are interested in the system. But this part really talks about basically just the funding part of the public housing. There are many other things that are probably common to all cities, and that has to do with the way you plan, what is good planning, about putting in good infrastructure, having planning very well integrated with transportation. I think these principles are universal.
Yeah, let's talk about some of those, because that seems to be probably instrumental to why public housing often fails in some cases. It doesn't have infrastructure, it's not well maintained, it's not planned well. So what are some of the lessons of planning and infrastructure that Singapore has for other cities when it comes to public housing?
Well, it's not just in public housing, but in the way we plan the whole of Singapore, because we are a very small place. We are barely half the size of metropolitan London, and we have to put in 5.6 million people. And we are a country, we're not just a city. So planning, especially taking a longer term view of planning, becomes extremely important for us. In fact, it's needed for survival. And by planning it well, we know exactly what land can be used for, that we have enough land, and it also makes sure that we know where to put our investments for infrastructure to make sure that a very dense city works. It works the same for a public housing town because you have limited land and it is very dense. So we plan it in such a way that the infrastructure is able to support the public housing growth, and that is very important. And you need to mitigate the high density. It is very high density at about 30,000 persons per square kilometers. So the way we planned, where we juxtapose the high rises and the low rises, bringing in a lot of greenery and blue elements, help to mitigate the densities.
What are some of the other design elements that are important to making sure that such a dense place doesn't feel crowded or oppressive?
Well, at the higher level, we talk about planning. At the mid-level, we talk about urban design, how the buildings relate to each other and public spaces. At the building level, it's a lot about the building typology. It's not just about designing a building and building a building for people to live in. It's designing for communities, it's designing for people. So you must understand culturally what is the lifestyle that people like. And it's also about designing a lot of public spaces and even spaces at a building level, whether they're roof gardens or sky gardens and community living rooms where people can interact. Because we are a very multiracial, multicultural society. And in fact, even the playgrounds are designed to be what we call 3-generation playgrounds, because you want the young to be there, but you want the old to be there to exercise and also to interact with the young. And so even the playgrounds we pay a lot of attention to.
The communal spirit, I guess.
Yes.
So we've been talking about a lot of the things that Singapore does very well and in the ways in which Singapore is a model for other cities. But what challenges does Singapore have? What's going to be the biggest constraint in making sure that you can continue to provide, sustainable, enjoyable lives for people as the city grows?
Well, obviously, land is a major constraint because we are limited by the amount of land that we have. And it is always easy for a city to build when it's greenfield site and it's new. But even Singapore, after 50, 60 years, a lot of it is slowly built up. We will have to start thinking about how do you rejuvenate the city, which is soon becoming a lot more mature. Just as you see in many, many of the Western older cities, we have to think about rejuvenation. So even in public housing towns, we have young, middle-aged, and older mature towns. And for the mature towns, we are already looking into upgrading projects for these towns to keep them young. So it's about upgrading the facades of buildings or even redeveloping older buildings. And this is also about bringing in younger families because people age with the city and they age with the town unless you can bring back younger families. So we have a lot of policies that encourage younger families to come back to live in the older towns.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.